In our next tutorial in Gimp, we're going to show you what some of the blur filters can do to our images and add extra cool effects that might not be available elsewhere. We'll start by using our blur, Gaussian blur, motion blur, and pixelize blur filters, and that way you can see all the neat types of things you can do with your image. As you can see, we started with a bunch of duplicate layers of our original image and renamed them to blur, Gaussian blur, motion blur, and pixelize. From there, we can select our blur layer, turn that visibility on, and then go up to the filters, blur, and then blur. And it'll add a subtle blur effect to the image. You can see it on here. It's now much different from the original image. The details have been lost. And then we'll go up to our Gaussian blur, turn that visibility on, go to filters, blur, Gaussian blur, and we'll turn the blur radius to about 11 seems fine. That's our Gaussian blur. And then we'll go to motion blur, turn that one on. Go to filters, blur, motion blur. We're going to make it a zoom, maybe about the center of the image here. The length of the zoom we'll put about 28, and it'll take a little bit longer to do this effect if your image is large. So now you can see that there is a kind of rush to get to the mountain look to the image. It's really cool. Then we'll go to our pixelize layer. Go to there, go to filter, blur, pixelize, and it'll create a kind of chunky pixel look to the image. So it'll actually kind of blur it out in something that's kind of like if you censor an image or protect someone's face or anything like that, you might see somebody has done something like this. So we'll set the pixel width to 7 and the pixel height to 7. And that is the pixelized blur on our image. So if we want to go back to regular blur, let's remove all the different visibilities of the other image. And we can change the opacity on this blur so we can change how much of the blur obscures the image, which is okay. If we go to Gaussian blur, we can do this with our opacity in such a way where we create kind of a hazy look to the image. You can see it looks like it's in some sort of a dream. Then to motion blur, if you wanted to change the opacity on there, it creates more of a kind of like ray-like effect coming out from the image itself. So you can dial that in as much as you want or as you like. Then if we go to pixelize, we can do the same thing where we can turn the opacity up or down on that, but it just changes whether or not the blocks show up. What we can do here is we can select part of the image and we can create kind of a border in the image. And to do that, we've selected a spot in the image. And then you'll want to go to the pixelize layer, add a layer mask, make it the selection that we've just put onto our layer, but invert the mask because we want a border on the inside and not just the inside of the selection as our pixelized blur. And then click add, and you can see now on the edges of the image, if you right click, select none, you can see on the edges of the image there's a nice pixelized border. And that's an intro to some of the different blur filters in Gimp.